A town person spends much of their time in buildings, in rooms, limited space, because you may be in a large limited space like a shop most of your day because you're an assistant, retail assistant, salesperson, or you may be in a tiny box much of your day like a car. You might be in a relatively small or large office. But now compare that to the person who, for argument's sake, is a farmer. He spends, well, traditionally, would have spent much of his day in the open air. A seemingly unlimited space. You know, when I was a kiddie, I was impressed by views. There was a very fine view on a road not so far, a few miles from us, on the way to Hockley in Essex from Rayleigh, and it had a lovely view out towards Battlesbridge and into the countryside, into the far distance beyond that. And I had a similar view from the playground of my school, the primary school, not the secondary. So I was impressed with views, and similarly I can remember that even my dad, an extremely secular person, was impressed, awestruck by the night sky, where you look up into an infinite distance. And I wonder how these different environments affect us, that we've shifted from, even if you're in the country now, you might spend all day in your tractor, mightn't you? Okay, lots of glass around it, that may give you quite a large view, but not the same as working in the field, if you like, out there with a scythe or a trowel. Yes. What's the effect of this change on us, where we've got a population now that lives largely in boxes, in rooms, or even smaller, like vehicles? And you compare that with a society where you lived basically in open space. Perhaps you crawled up into your hut at night, but in the daytime you were out the front of it cooking or hunting or whatever it was. I think there's been a dramatic change of a visual environment. Of course, our environment's changed in other ways, in that the air we breathe is nothing like open air now. We're in closed rooms, especially in cooler climates. We're economizing on power. We shut the windows. The aircon is on, perhaps, but it's an artificial now environment, isn't it? And the various mixes in the air that we're breathing is probably not what we would have been breathing outdoors, especially if we say a few hundred years ago. Well, unless you live near an industrial town, in which case it's probably considerably better. I noticed in something this morning, I was wondering, what is the basic chemical analysis of urine? Well, obviously it's 95% water and so on. And then there's the carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen compounds. I know carbohydrates is what I'm sort of thinking of in my mind. But I don't know if that's technically the right word in this case. But and then there's, well, as I noticed, there's a certain element of pure chlorine in there. And you think to yourself, would that be in the urine if people were not drinking chlorinated water? chlorine's in there to kill the bugs, of course, and presumably it doesn't do your internal flora too much good either. In other words, it to some extent kills us as well, or at least is something that the body's got to now muster itself against and cope with the casualty of, you know. We've changed our environment. So when people take a retreat, like I've got a Buddhist friend who disappears off at the Coromandel or other places and just is alone, and I think perhaps he's alone meditating in a building, but I have the notion of a retreat where you basically sit in the garden or the countryside as much as weather permits, and daytime permits, of course. I mean, most people don't want to sleep in the open at night outdoors, do they? And possibly you're asleep anyway, so psychologically where you are may not mean much at all. In fact, the safety of a room, security of such, may mean the sleep is much deeper. I don't know. But it crosses my mind then that a retreat to be effective might need to be as much in the open as possible. And a nice open too, like particularly lovely countryside or by the sea. You know, perhaps the sound of the ocean is magical in spiritual sense in its effect. And certainly we think, I say certainly, but we think the dawn chorus and the birds singing and the buzz of nature in summertime is entrancing. I don't know. Thank you, Dad.
Oh, if I may just add to that, I used to think very much that a gypsy longed to be in the open. Just couldn't live in a house, you know, it was sort of suffocating psychologically. And now, of course, in later life, I've come to live in New Zealand. Well, they're obsessed with having a batch by the seaside to retreat to in summer. At Christmas time here is summer, you know. And, well, the other great thing is on retirement, they very often like to have a camper van and just wander across New Zealand and similarly Australia, I think. People love to just probably psychologically feel the freedom of not being necessarily located in one place. There's all sorts of disadvantages as well, of course. I mean, the more mobile you are, the less deep relationship you have with those that you're constantly moving away from, you know. Oh, and I was struck while doing the recording this one, how, yes, my accommodation at present is a flat on the upper floor of a house which is on the top of a hill, and in one direction I've got a view of part of the Hamilton Lake in New Zealand, North Island, and my main view, sitting in my armchair here as I gaze out into the distance, is some I don't know, 25 kilometres away, 20 kilometres or so, Taupri Mountain, and straight ahead of me and slightly to the left of it, the gorge where the Waikato cuts through going north, and the stretching to the left, the Hakaramatas, which are I say mountain, I mean they're under 1,000 feet. So not technically a mountain, are they? But and they're not, no question of it being snow on top, of course. I mean, we're in a warm maritime sort of climate here, and so they're green. In fact, they're dark green because they tend to be covered in bush, and the New Zealand bush is an incredible variety of evergreen plants in this latitude here, anyway. And I realise, yeah, whenever I look up, I've got this big window and a tiny balcony with a door onto it, window door, and I've got this lovely distant view, which I find helps my meditation. I've tended in meditation to have my eyes open, not shut, and to fix my gaze in the distance, probably from childhood. You know, playground waiting for lunchtime to end, looking into the distance. There you are. Might be the foundation of my philosophical type character. I don't know. Thank you, Dad.